well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. Going to be spending some time with Advancing American Freedom's Amy Swearer. Amy had a thread on X on Tuesday evening that I found fascinating. I mean, you know, I look at defensive gun use stories every day. We have a defensive gun use story every day here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company, and she was actually talking about a couple of stories that I had completely missed. Individuals who acted in self-defense in New York State who are still facing criminal charges. In fact, who are facing felony criminal charges. They are facing the possibility of years in prison because even though they acted in lawful self-defense, they did so with firearms that were unregistered, and these individuals did not have a permit to carry. If you carry a loaded firearm in New York State, you are considered that is considered a violent felony. Possessing a firearm is considered an act of violence that is worthy of years behind bars. And that's exactly what's going on with these two individuals. Take a look and a listen. Amy, thanks so much for joining me on the program. It's good to see you again.
Hey, it is always a pleasure to be on with you, Cam.
Well, I got to say I was fascinated by this. I mean, you know, you have been covering defensive gun uses for a number of years. Love your roundups. Love seeing them at the PJ Media in recent months. But you've highlighted a couple of things that a couple of cases that are they're defensive gun uses, but they're a little different, right? You talk about draconian gun laws hurting crime victims, and you've run across several of these stories over the past couple of days, including in Syracuse, New York. You say 2 of the 3 homicides this year in Syracuse have been self-defense shootings, right? These have been justifiable homicides. But both of these victims are still facing charges. What's going on here?
Yeah, so this, again, like you said, this is an example of what happens when you have draconian gun laws that apply not just against the criminals who probably are not going to follow them, but when they apply against just ordinary citizens who are peaceable people who just want to exercise their right of armed self-defense. So Syracuse, New York, by all accounts, from everything I can tell, at least up until a couple days ago, only 3 homicides so far this year. 2 of those self-defense shootings. You had prosecutors come out and say, look, we can't decide. They clearly acted in self-defense. In both situations, there was actually corroborating evidence. There were either witnesses who corroborated it or other sorts of evidence that clearly pointed to self-defense. And yet, like you said, both of these individuals are now facing not just charges, not just little slaps on the wrist, but in both cases, in New York, it's considered a violent felony for which they're facing a mandatory minimum of 3.5 years in prison, up to 15 years. Potentially. And it's all because of New York's generally applicable gun control laws. They're common sense gun control laws. So the first individual fired at a guy who fired at him first. He had better aim, was able to successfully protect himself. By all accounts, doesn't seem to have a disqualifying history, right? This isn't, some violent felon who is defending his, cocaine empire. He could have applied for a concealed carry permit. It seems like he would have been qualified for one. But as you know, in New York, that is a huge bureaucratic process. It can sometimes be hundreds, even thousands of dollars, take months of time and effort. And sometimes it feels like you have to be a lawyer to try to figure out how the heck you do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so this man had not jumped through all of those bureaucratic hoops. And so New York got him with 2 felonies. The first felony for having a gun that was not registered. And the second felony was this one, again, considered the violent felony, was for just carrying that same loaded handgun in public, period. Not for any crime, not for anything, but they consider that a violent felony just to possess a handgun that is loaded in public if you don't have a concealed carry permit. And again, keep in mind, this is not a violent felon with this lengthy criminal history. This is just a guy who didn't pay hundreds to thousands of dollars to jump through bureaucratic hoops. Same thing. And actually, in some respects, this one might be more unbelievable. You had a landlord. It looks like he had like a dual complex where he actually lived in one of the homes.
Mm-hmm.
There's a domestic dispute with some of his tenants. He goes to protect some of these victims in this violent domestic dispute. Gets in between the victim and the assailant. Ends up protecting himself and the victim by shooting the assailant. Again, deemed lawful self-defense. He protected and potentially saved the life of not just himself, but other third-party innocent victims. And again, he, just like the other individual, facing years in prison over this, unbelievably in an apartment or dwelling that he owned, right? Keep in mind, he owns this place, but because he doesn't live there, they're getting him with carrying in public without a license and having an unregistered firearm. Now, I will say it does look like this individual had a technically disqualifying criminal history 25 years earlier. He had been convicted of like the lowest level, like possession, drug felony offense.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, he had been eligible for restoration of rights under New York law for at least 20 years. It seems like it's the only thing he's ever done wrong in his entire life. So he actually had been eligible to have his rights returned to him under New York law. He just, again, hadn't followed through that bureaucratic process to do it. And sometimes that can even be more of a process than getting your concealed carry permit, especially in places like New York. And again, this is almost unbelievable to me that a prosecutor would look at this and think that this is in the interest of justice to charge these men and pursue convictions against individuals who were themselves crime victims, who the police were not there to protect, and who in one case actually went out of their way to protect an innocent person. He chose to introduce himself to that situation to protect someone when police were not there. And to look at this and to think that this was the point of common sense gun laws, was to send these men to prison, that's unconscionable to me. And I think that should be unconscionable to anybody with any sense of morality and fairness and justice.
Absolutely. And I mean, to point to just the sort of arbitrary nature of this, you note that the individual in the first case, the guy who was not technically disqualified from possessing a firearm, he just hadn't gone through all of the hoops and hurdles, he's actually being held without bail. He is stuck behind bars. They are not letting him out because supposedly, he's a danger to the community, even though prosecutors admit he acted in self-defense. The other individual, the landlord, was released without any bail at all, right? He's just on his own recognizance.
Right.
Two individuals, both again acting in self-defense, one acting in defense of another as well, but both facing similar charges, one being held without the opportunity to even, provide bail. The other didn't have to do that whatsoever. It's absurd. And, going to this mandatory minimum of 3.5 years, that was put in place thanks to Michael Bloomberg. He felt like the existing law was not, serious enough. He pushed for that mandatory minimum sentence. It is very rare to be able to avoid this. I did see one case recently, though, in New York City. Cyndi Lauper's son, Dex Lauper, was charged with possessing a loaded handgun in public. But prosecutors actually offered him a sweetheart plea deal. He was able to enter into a pretrial diversion program. If he keeps his nose clean, charge will be wiped away entirely. So he just basically is going to spend a couple of years on probation. Now, I don't know if that is only available to the sons and daughters of celebrities, or if the average New Yorker can avail themselves of a plea deal like that. But I hope that both of these defendants are given the same leniency that a celebrity's son was given in New York City.
Absolutely. And it's a shame that they've been put into this sort of situation in the first place.
Absolutely.
And even then, it's quite possible that even if they're not ultimately charged and convicted of it, in many cases, they will use that arrest as reasons to delay or deny any application for a concealed carry permit going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, even then it's not as simple as saying, oh, okay, the interests of justice were served by dropping the charges, because that will continue to follow them in places like New York. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And, another state where you've got basically a felony charge just for possessing a firearm without a license in public, is the state of Michigan. And you found another example of the draconian gun laws impacting people who act in self-defense out of Flint, Michigan, right?
Yeah, and this is this is something that you'd be shocked how often we run into these sorts of stories. But just to see so many of them just so recently, so publicly for things that were so clearly self-defense. So in Michigan, you had an individual, a concealed carry permit holder, right? So he did jump through the hoops. He got the permit. He did the training. He did everything that, gun control advocates are like, that's what we want you to do, to be a law-abiding citizen. He did that. He had a defensive gun use that, on the surface reads like so many of the ones that we see. He was in a bathroom. He was sort of cornered by a group of individuals who viciously, very, very violently assaulted him, punched him in the face while they pinned his arms back, tried to strangle him. Those individuals are now facing, at least one of them, decades in prison for this offense. Fortunately, our concealed carry permit holder was able to free a hand, draw his gun. He only needs to fire one shot to defend himself, to ward that off until eventually police get there. And they do arrest his assailants. Prosecutors come out and they say this was self-defense. This was clearly self-defense. We're not charging him with assault, battery, shooting someone. But they do charge him for essentially having the audacity to exercise his right to armed self-defense in the wrong place, because this bathroom happened to be inside of a sports arena, which was this public access arena as part of a community college. So he was just there playing basketball, goes into the bathroom, gets assaulted. And because he had the audacity to defend himself in a place that Michigan said, well, that's a gun-free zone. It's apparently not an assault-free zone. It's, it's not a crime-free zone, but it's a gun-free zone for you. They've charged him as well. Now, I will say, I guess a little bit of a silver lining here, though it's still bad, is that in Michigan, they're not treating it as a felony. It's actually a civil infraction. But as a consequence of this, ironically, for again, defending incorrect about his need for self-defense in this place that Michigan said, well, you shouldn't have to worry about self-defense there. The punishment is that his concealed carry permit gets suspended for 6 months and they're seizing his firearm. So for being right about where he needed armed self-defense in a particular place, he now loses his right to armed self-defense in any place outside of his home for the next 6 months. Is that on par with 3.5 years mandatory minimum? No, but it is still egregious. It's the height of irony in the worst way. And again, you just see how these laws, even less than draconian laws, when they're applied just generally against everybody, regardless of the circumstances, they only act to punish law-abiding individuals, right? Because here you have the 3 people who assaulted him who didn't violate that law. They violated a lot of other laws, right? But it only applies against 2. The man who actually needed to rely on that to defend himself.
Yeah. It's, and there is such a thing as prosecutorial discretion. These prosecutors, I think in every one of these cases could have said, listen, it's not appropriate that we put somebody in prison because they defended themselves, even with an unlicensed firearm. So these are choices that prosecutors have made that, no, we actually are going to see that these individuals are punished for protecting themselves, but violating the law while doing so. Right. And again, we're not talking about, somebody who acted in self-defense because home invaders came in, as you say, to rob them of their drug proceeds. Right. There's no underlying criminal activity involved here other than the possessory offense. Right. Of not having the right paperwork. And again, in most of the states, this wouldn't be a crime, right? You've got 29 permitless carry states. No permit to carry is even required. These individuals would be, in the clear, perhaps not the individual with the very low-level felony from 25 years ago. Although that, too, I think is very much open to legal interpretation.
In some states, in some states, he might have had that right automatically restored, right? So it's these are all choices. These are public policy choices that states put into place, and these are choices that prosecutors make. And I think at the very least, it's important that we highlight this, because sometimes it feels like we're nuts, right? When you have gun control advocates who are like, why would anyone be against this, right? If you're a law-abiding, peaceable citizen, what's the problem? This is the problem. This, and I truly believe that if most gun control advocates, if you went to them in a vacuum and said, is this fair and just? They'd say no. I suspect a lot of them would be like, that's actually not fair and just to prosecute these men. Well, if it's not fair and just to prosecute them, why is it the law, right? Why are we passing these laws that you are reasonably foreseeing and now actually literally seeing the ways in which this is abused?
Yeah.
Why don't we just not do that? Because that's the only way this can be applied against peaceable citizens who weren't otherwise committing crimes.
Yeah, I'm completely with you. And even from a gun control advocate's perspective. So I mean, I don't think permitting laws are necessary. I don't like them. I believe in constitutional carry. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, fine. You got to have a permit to carry in New York. I look at some of the laws that were passed in Virginia this session. Like there's a gun storage bill that if you have a juvenile in the home or there's a prohibited person in the home, that you got to have that gun locked up at all times unless it's on your person. But there's an exception written into that rule that the law is not violated if a juvenile uses that firearm to act in self-defense. Which there's a carve out there. So why would we not have a similar carve out at the very least? That okay, we're not going to charge you for possessing a firearm without a license if you use that firearm to act in self-defense or defense of others. Again, gun control advocates have already accepted that when it comes to gun storage. So why not gun carriage as well?
Yeah, and I think I suspect some of it is it's a laziness in writing and framing the laws, right? Because that takes some effort to think through this. And it also involves ceding very important points, right? That self-defense with firearms does happen, with respect to juveniles in the home, right? We get told all the time, well, why would anyone be against laws that keep guns out of the hands of juveniles? Again, I could point to dozens of stories over the last, couple of years that I've been doing defensive gun analysis, defensive gun work. This happens, right? Far more often than I think a lot of people realize. What I say are the majority of defensive gun uses juveniles using a family gun in the home? No. But just within the last couple of weeks, just one off the top of my head, out of Philadelphia, you had a woman whose 11-year-old son came to her defense. Her boyfriend had a history of domestic violence and was violently beating her in the home. She was a lawful gun owner, had, I think, actually a concealed carry permit for the handgun. The 11-year-old son not only knew where the firearm was, knew how to use it, came to his mom's defense, saved her life potentially in that home. And it's far from the only time. So I agree. It's important, but I think, again, part of this is they have to see that point, that it is important, that the right of armed self-defense is fundamental to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that these situations that they say never happen do in fact happen frequently enough that we should be concerned about punishing people for them.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I really appreciate, again, all of the work that you're doing to uncover these stories. I'd actually run across that Michigan story. I think I wrote about it at Bearing Arms, but I'm glad to see you highlight this. And I had no idea about the Syracuse, New York stories. Those were eye-opening to me. So continue keeping up the fantastic work. Where can folks find you online? I mentioned PJ Media. You're doing the defensive gun use roundups there, sure. I believe, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, great shout out to PJ Media. So it looks like we've, got the defensive gun use op-eds up and running if you used to follow those. So be on the lookout for those at PJ Media. You can always follow me on Twitter at Amy Swearer. Or I'm at Advancing American Freedom. You can always check out our website, check out our Twitter account online at Advancing Freedom. You can see not just what I'm doing, but what all of my colleagues are doing, trying to I almost want to be trying to advance American freedom, a little on the nose, but no, we're doing some great work here, and you're always free to check us out.
Well, Amy, again, thanks so much for joining me on the program today. I look forward to doing this again very soon, and please keep up what you're doing.
Thanks, Cam.
And thanks to Amy for joining us on the program, and looking forward to having her back again. If you're not following her on X right now, you absolutely should, because she's providing, again, some really great coverage of Second Amendment news and issues. All right, on to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there with a rather disturbing story from Florida, where a man accused of shooting and killing a 2-year-old has a history of domestic violence and other violent crimes, and yet was still out on the street. This is from Jacksonville, Florida. 21-year-old Stephen Dodson Jr., just 21 years old, charged with murder, attempted murder, child endangerment, tampering with evidence, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, according to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. He was found on Monday after a nearly 24-hour-long search and was arrested. The 2-year-old was shot and later passed away at the hospital after an argument among adults in a home in Jacksonville, according to the Sheriff's Office. Duval County court records show that Dodson has a history of domestic violence, gun charges, and other violent crimes. How could a 21-year-old have a history of those things and still, again, be on the streets? First incident happened in December of 2022, 4 months after he turned 18. An arrest warrant states that Dodson was identified as one of 5 people who beat up a 16-year-old over an apparent diss track that had been released on social media. The incident was captured on video and was also posted to social media, according to the arrest report. Victim told the police that Dodson and 4 others pulled up on him, asking that he make a music video with them. They then took the teenager to a home where he told police that Dodson brandished a handgun before taking his phone. The 5 individuals then took the teen to the ground, started punching and kicking him in the face. Dodson, again, was arrested for that crime, then arrested once again on Valentine's Day in 2023, just a few months after this incident, for hitting a woman that he'd been in a relationship with for the past 3 years, hitting her in the face, according to the associated arrest report. In that instance, the woman told police that Dodson came to the duplex that they shared, broke her bedroom window, started a fight with her. She told police that Dodson then punched her on the chin before another man living in the home came to help her get away from him. The police report states that that man and Dodson then began fighting over her. And while they were fighting, she was slammed against a wall, knocking out her 2 front teeth. Another witness told police that he too saw Dodson punch the woman in the face. And then when the struggle ensued, he saw him punch her in the face a second time. So you got 2 instances. Dodson was then charged with strong-armed robbery, as well as domestic battery for the 2 separate incidents, but he pleaded no contest to both. In June of 2023, he was adjudicated as guilty, sentenced to 10 months in jail, with credit for 4 months time served, followed by 30 months of probation. So he got 6 months behind bars for these 2 violent assaults. That's it. In June of 2024, Dodson was then arrested and charged with possession of a firearm as a convicted felon after police saw him and another man wearing ski masks and purple surgical gloves run away after spotting an officer in his patrol car. Now, generally in Florida in June, there's no reason to wear a ski mask. No good reason to wear a ski mask anyway. Officer chased after the 2 individuals, found him hiding in a van. A gun was found where Dodson was hiding. Dodson claimed he knew nothing about the gun, but he was charged. He was found guilty in 2024, which also created a violation of his probation. And in October of 2024, he was sentenced to 20 months in state prison. He served about 11. That's it. He was released from prison. I take it back. He served about 13 months because he was released from prison in November of 2025, according to the Florida Department of Corrections records. Now, if prosecutors had taken that felon in possession case to federal prosecutors, Dodson likely would still be behind bars today. That crime is punishable under federal law by up to 10 years in federal prison. It is incredibly rare for somebody to get that full 10-year sentence, particularly if this is their first time being charged with felon in possession of a firearm. But I think he would have spent more than 13 months behind bars. My guess is it would be something closer to 2 years, 3 years behind bars for that offense. And then he still, again, would have been incarcerated rather than out and allegedly getting into a fight, pulling a gun, firing shots, one of which hit and killed a 2-year-old. So that is how a 21-year-old with a lengthy criminal history was out on the street and is now charged with murder. Today's Armed Citizen story from Ohio, and I'm going to call this a potential case of self-defense simply because this case has not yet gone to a grand jury, but as you'll hear, all indications are this was, in fact, a justifiable use of force. This comes from Boardman, Ohio, where the Vindicator newspaper says a fatal shooting may have been an act of self-defense. I think they, too, are playing it safe here, simply because there is still technically the possibility the grand jury could return charges. I just don't think it's likely. So this incident happened back on March the 7th, but the police report was only made public yesterday. And as the Vindicator writes, it seems to indicate that the death of 45-year-old Montrell Gilbert in Boardman may have been a case of self-defense. So police responded about 3:15 in the morning of March the 7th to an apartment complex there in Boardman. There were multiple calls to the Mahoning County 911 Center where police could hear people threatening to kill one another. Shortly after officers arrived on scene of the apartment complex, they heard multiple gunshots from the south side of this building. And when they got to the rear of that building, that's when they found Gilbert on the ground with a large pool of blood. According to the police report, when officers asked who shot him, there was a woman in the crowd who said she did. And she told police she lived in the apartment. So police took her aside. She explained that Gilbert was her boyfriend. She said that her doorbell camera had notified her that someone was at her home. And while she's on the phone with Gilbert, with her boyfriend, she could see him actually trying to kick in the door to her bedroom. She said that her 3 children were in the house, one of them 18. But she was not actually in the apartment at the time. She was at a home in Youngstown, Ohio. So she said that while she's on the phone with Gilbert, Gilbert threatens to burn down the apartment where her 3 children are. She then told police that her sister's boyfriend showed up at the apartment before she did and before her sister did, knowing Gilbert's, quote, problematic history. So she says that when she arrived, she circles the blocks at least twice. Says she's worried about an altercation between Gilbert and her sister's boyfriend. Police corroborated this. They had video from a nearby property owner that appears to show a vehicle in the driveway of the apartment. One man standing outside the SUV pointing a gun at the driver's head. The individual standing outside the SUV with the gun is believed to be Gilbert. The report states that the woman said when she decided to stop circling, exit her vehicle, and try to go into the apartment, Gilbert actually jumped out at her from the bushes. She says another man then jumped in front of Gilbert. Gilbert grabbed him, threw him down on the ground, and pointed a gun at him. At that point, the woman says that's when she drew her own handgun and fired what she believed to be 3 shots at Gilbert. Police actually found 4 shell casings from her handgun there at the scene. As police were coming around the side of the building, issuing orders to drop the gun, remember they could hear the sound of the gunshots. She did drop the firearm. She did not flee. And the Vindicator says, according to Mahoning County online court records, Gilbert was facing charges in Mahoning County from a 2019 case in which he was indicted for having weapons under disability, permitted person, possession of a fentanyl-related compound, possession of cocaine, possession of heroin, as well as improper handling of a firearm in a motor vehicle. He had previously been charged in 2014 with having weapons under disability and improper handling of a firearm in a motor vehicle. Those charges were dismissed for some reason. In 2009, he was found guilty of possession of dangerous drugs in one case, also convicted on 2 counts of possession of drugs, 1 count of possession of cocaine, but charges of having weapons under disability and a low-level felony drug count were dismissed in a plea deal. So, again, the woman was not arrested at the scene, has not been charged by police. The police in Boardman, Ohio, says that the case needs to be referred to the Mahoning County Prosecutor's Office for a decision on any potential charges. It's now been more than 2 weeks since this shooting occurred. One would think that this case has been forwarded to the DA's office. And given the lack of charges so far, I'm guessing that none are forthcoming. But we'll keep our eyes open. And, sometimes these cases, even when they're clear cut, it can be months. Sometimes it can be over a year before prosecutors actually make the call that, no, we're not going to pursue any criminal charges in this case. So I hope that this woman doesn't have to wait that long to find out whether or not she has been officially cleared and this has been ruled a justifiable shooting. But again, we'll keep our eyes open for any updates out of Boardman, Ohio. Finally, today, our good deed of the day. In the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A soldier who saved a passenger's life while in the air over the Pacific Ocean. This was a Southwest Airlines flight. And the soldier in question, an Army sergeant from Joint Base Lewis McChord, delivering emergency medical care for 3 hours after a man was found unconscious in one of the bathrooms on the plane. First Sergeant Timmy Turner, fans of Fairly Odd Parents are going to be really surprised to know that Timmy Turner ended up in the Army. First Sergeant Timmy Turner and his wife returning back to Washington State on Wednesday. They had actually gone to Hawaii to bury Timmy Turner's dad. And the last thing he says he expected on the flight was a call by flight attendants for help. But about 2.5 hours into the flight from Honolulu up to Seattle, flight attendants discovered a 65-year-old man, unconscious and unresponsive, in the airport lavatory, or the airplane lavatory. And they put out a call over the intercom asking for any medical personnel on board to come forward and assist. Turner has experience in both combat medicine and respiratory therapy with the 62nd Medical Brigade, and he immediately stepped forward, along with 2 other passengers who also had healthcare experience. He said, myself and the other gentleman who was an EMT, we grabbed the gentleman in question, very confined quarters. His vitals were all over the place. They weren't normal. The man had vomited, but was otherwise completely unresponsive. A very faint pulse, according to Turner. So Turner directed crew members to bring him in AED, an artificial external defibrillator, an oxygen tank, as well as an IV. Able to turn the man over on his side, kept monitoring his vitals for 3 hours while the pilot diverted to the nearest available airport, which happened to be Oakland, California. And Turner said they actually had a system set up in place where they were able to plug in a headset so we could talk to a medical provider on the ground via satellite phone, which was outstanding, he said. And then they were able to land safely. Turner said they were able to get the plane directly to a gate where EMS was able to board the aircraft very quickly. Took the man off of the plane. Don't know officially what happened to this gentleman afterwards. Southwest Airlines confirmed the medical emergency, but unable to provide an update on the passenger's condition. Turner says the last information that he got was that the man was still alive when they took him off the plane and, took him to the hospital. But again, we don't know any update after that. But it sounds like he and that other passenger, those 2 other passengers, may very well have provided life-saving care, certainly in keeping that individual alive long enough for EMTs and the doctors to get to work on him. So in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. First Sergeant Timmy Turner there in Washington State, we thank you for your very, very good deed. And that is all the time we've got for you in this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company, but I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. Looking forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow as we do the last Cam & Company of the week. But I would also encourage you to check out bearingarms.com throughout the day today. There's a lot going on. En banc hearing in California this afternoon, I believe 4 o'clock Eastern time, 1 p.m. Pacific. Rody versus Bonta. This is the case dealing with California's ammunition background checks. A 3-judge panel on the Ninth Circuit declared that law unconstitutional. The state of California requested that en banc hearing. The Ninth Circuit agreed. Now, what's interesting is the makeup of this panel, right? The Ninth Circuit is so big, you got 27 judges, that it's basically a random draw as to who's going to be on these en banc panels. And this go-around, you at least have a majority of Republican-appointed judges. And based on the past history of some of their rulings, I think there's a decent chance that the en banc decision is actually going to uphold the 3-judge panel's decision that found this law unconstitutional. Remember, this is not just background checks on ammunition sales in California. This is also a prohibition on purchasing ammunition out of state and then bringing it back into California as well. All kinds of problems with California's background check system, all kinds of false denials. In fact, I believe, I'm going to give you like rough estimates, but I believe that there was something like, let's say tens of thousands of false denials versus a couple hundred cases where prohibited persons were actually prevented from purchasing ammunition. That's a problem. I mean, that's just a failed system at that point. But that was only one of the reasons why the 3-judge panel ruled against California's law. This is essentially no national tradition of regulated ammunition in this way, directly implicating our right to keep and bear arms, providing a substantial delay for a lot of people in exercising their right to keep and bear arms. So the law is problematic from a constitutional and a common sense standpoint. But again, oral arguments in the en banc hearing taking place this afternoon. We're watching what's going on in state houses around the country as well. Some states have sine died for the year. Other states are still ongoing. New York Governor Kathy Hochul making another major push yesterday for new restrictions on 3D printers, making it a felony to disseminate or distribute code that can be used to print frames and receivers or, quote, major components of firearms. So we're watching that as well. Watching some pro-gun bills out there. There are still a couple of them. So, again, be sure to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day today. We're keeping you covered on all of those issues. And if you like what you see, I would encourage you to become a VIP Gold, or VIP Platinum member. Just go to BearingArms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code FIGHT, and you can get 60% off your membership. If you're a Gold and Platinum member, one of the cool benefits is every Wednesday I do a live chat with Hot Air's Ed Morrissey at 1:30 Eastern. And today we're also going to be doing our after party because once a month we get together with our VIP Gold and Platinum members around 6 o'clock Eastern to just continue the conversation. Whatever you want to talk about, whatever's on your mind, it is a great hour. Tonight's going to be another great hour as well. Love for you to be a part of that. And again, 60% off your VIP Gold, VIP Platinum membership when you go to BearingArms.com/subscribe. Have a great rest of your Hump Day Wednesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.